Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining us for today's IGLTA Members Connect with CVB and DMO members. Today, our special guest, David Downing, Certified Destination Management Executive. David is a dear friend of IGLTA who led the charge as CEO of Visit St. Pete Clearwater.
St. Pete.
Yay!
Who positioned St. Pete as a major world-class LGBTQ destination. While he was president and CEO of Visit St. Pete, he welcomed the IGLTA 34th Annual Global Convention in 2017. And we can all agree that he definitely played an integral role in the success of that convention. So David is now a top executive at Tampa Bay-based hospitality marketing group, United Landmark Associates, in his new role as president of brand. And he is here to talk to us today about 5 tips for brand stewards moving forward. So with that, David, I will turn it over to you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, sir. And thanks IGLTA for doing this. You guys have had great success. I know some organizations have had less success, but I think it speaks to your membership that you have people who are interested in having these updates all the time. And you've done a very good job of segmenting, by the way, into different groups. A lot of other organizations I belong to and have spoken with and on have kept doing these very general things. So good on you guys for doing that, John. I don't know whose idea was, probably Loanne's. Whose idea was it? Come on.
Well, yeah, let's say Loanne.
Okay, all right. We'll props to Lo. So Josh, if you would throw that back up for just a minute. I'm going to run through the 5 points I'm going to talk about. Never more than 5, usually 3, but 5 is the maximum. Look, we can't even remember 7 digits in a phone number. We remember 7 things. So 5 tips for your brand steward. And I said brand steward purposely because whether you're in marketing or public relations or a member of an organization or on any level, you are a steward of your brand. You are part of that brand. Your brand lives in you. So these are the 5 takeaways. I'm going to go into them each in depth a little bit, but don't give your brand coronavirus is the first one. It's not meant to be sound as dismissive or as coy as it is, but it's a very real thing. And I'll talk through where I think some brands really are doing that. And I don't think for the long-term viability of your brand, that's the space you need to be in. Number 2, there's no hold music. There's no hold music for your brand. You have to keep it moving forward. Number 3, once you do, you have to remind, redirect, and reinforce from a brand perspective. Learn the lesson, and then partner. So those are the 5, and I just wanted to put them up there so everyone sees who I am, sees what I'm talking about, and I promise I will talk to each of those things moving forward. So Josh, let's go to the camera now then. So what I mean when I said that there's no coronavirus is that, don't give your brand coronavirus is, look, if you weren't talking about pandemics beforehand, it's probably not a good idea to have your brand talking about pandemics right now. If you aren't an arbiter of information from a health or a CDC perspective, by and large, it probably is not a space that you should be in right now. Josh, I'm just checking. Am I on? Because I don't see anything. I can't hear you. Just want to make sure.
I can
Okay. All right, good. Yeah. All I'm seeing is a blank blue screen, so I just want to make sure that's cool. Not that I need help, John. I don't need to see myself. Trust me.
We see you, so that's what matters.
Hey, that's all good. So for example, I've seen a lot of. Let me give you a backup example, and this is from Loanne when she and I were talking about this, and she said this, and this is exactly right. When you're a journalist, you're a media organization, and you're running a correction. When you run a correction, you never repeat the thing that you're correcting. You only repeat the information that is correct. So for example, if it said, John Tanzella is 37 years old. In last week's edition of, Toilet Paper Weekly, we said otherwise, right? We never say, oh, we called him 75 years old. We only say the redirection. Did you like that example? And this goes back to just basic best practices of brand direction and about marketing and 101 and basically human psychology. Look, when we dealt with the oil spill here in 2010, and it was a massive thing. Everyone remembers this. CNN had a live HD camera of this out of control gusher at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico, and that's all they ran 24/7, 365. Although we had no oil here in our destination and still haven't since, we had to do a lot of corrective advertising and start an entire new, basically a new campaign. But we were very careful not to mention oil. We never mentioned the oil spill. All we said is our beaches are open, our beaches are wide open. Visit stpclearwater.com. So that was an example, and we would send, you know, scuba teams from the local colleges. Kids will go out and they dive on the reef, so you could see what that looked like firsthand, and that's your kind of, that's your thing there. So don't, if you aren't in that space already, don't be talking about coronavirus in ways that's going to give your brand coronavirus. I've seen some really bad examples of this. I've seen some good examples. So for example, Oreo, I don't know if you've seen it. I was going to play it, but sometimes playing these things get a little bit tricky. But Google the Oreo spot called Stay Playful. It's user-generated content. You know, when people eat Oreos, they play checkers with them, they balance them on their face. They had this whole user-generated content before coronavirus of people doing fun things with Oreos. And then they just expanded that to Stay Playful, Stay Home. And it worked so beautifully because they were saying something that was on brand for their product, but had an overtone to it that worked very well for it as well. The other one would be like some destinations have done well. Like Virginia Tourism has a spot called Virginia's for Lovers. We're here waiting for you, and they just showed beautiful images of the destination, of all these iconic destination images. They're basically sending postcards to their fans, to their visitors, to their brand loyalists. So they said, look, whenever you are here and you are ready, we're here. If any brand thinks they're going to change someone's mind about traveling or about usage of their brand in any way by information, that's not going to happen. Everyone has seen, we were talking before the broadcast about how politicized the coronavirus and your reaction to it has become. Look, people are going to travel. People are going to engage your brand when they're ready, on their own turf, in their own way, on their own dime, on their own budget. So all you can do is focus more on you and telling the authenticity of your brand, and not putting it out there like you're trying to direct them and tell them what's best for them. That's never going to work. People will only do what they think is best for them, and the brand is likely not going to change their mind. So that's the overarching idea of not giving your brand coronavirus, because I've seen some really bad examples. I've seen some examples actually in destination marketing of, in the videos about how to social distance, they aren't even social distancing. They aren't even following the CDC recommendations in the videos they're putting together to tell their guests. So I would say be really careful about wading into that airspace, because chances are it's not going to do you or your brand very much good. So start there. The second point is there's no hold music. I've dealt with a lot of luxury brands in my role now, and in you know, a lot of particularly luxury brands are thinking we're gonna tap out. We're not going to do any advertising. We're going to wait for all this to blow over. That's really not how this works. When you say we're not going to participate in advertising, it's other people are. So you're saying I'm stopping in the stream. I'm stopped. Well, guess what? The stream's moving forward. So you're actually going backwards. So I wouldn't think of it like that. Look, your brand is on 24/7, 365. You can't turn your brand off. I don't care what your organization is or what your product is or what your destination is. You have a website, you have a brand, you've got people looking at you all the time. You can't say, you know, you'll talk amongst yourselves, because A, what's going to be said about you is going to be something that you likely won't want said about you, or worse yet, B, no one's going to talk about you at all, and it's going to move on from there. So be really persistent and judicious in pushing your brand forward in everything that you do in support of it. And don't think, you know, like segment like, oh, I'm just going to do social, I'm just going to do this, I'm just going to do that. All these things are related. The platforms are intertwined. Everyone knows there's so much bleed over from one into the next these days that to say we're just doing this, that, or the thing seems a little bit naive to me. I'll give you an example of why this doesn't work, and we have such great information as to why this doesn't work. Over the years, different state tourism agencies have been defunded by know-it-all legislators who believe, oh, why waste money? Even in Florida here, the last two speakers of the House, but believe it or not, have tried to defund Florida completely. Some of them saying things so incredibly, wow, I can't even go there, uneducated as to say, well, you know, people know about our beaches and Disney, and that's all they need to know. We don't need to remind them. It's clearly that person doesn't understand advertising or marketing. And there have been some really good case examples of Colorado, for one, some others in the Northwest and the Northeast as well, of state tourism agencies who got defunded. Look, when you get out of line from a brand perspective and you just go to the back of the line and you start all over again when and if they decide to turn that switch back on. That happened to Colorado. To this day, they still don't have their market share, the share of the market they had for skiing that they had when that was instituted. You will pay 10 times as much and you'll do everything you can, and you will never get back to where you were before you decided to do this. So if you are a government fund, if you're a destination, a DMO that is relying on bed tax like everyone does, or even state agencies, because they're all set up a little bit differently. Here in Florida, ours isn't bed tax. It's tax from some ad valorem tax dollars and some from the rental car industry, which is in trouble right now too. But you can't just decide to turn things off. Every DMO I know right now and state agencies are cutting because they see the drop in tourism that's already happened. They're predictive modeling how far they might get. That's a smart thing to do, but it means being very judicious about how you spend your funds and what you spend them doing. So tag that and release it, that there's no hold music. What are you doing? What are you doing when you decide to move forward? You have to remind people who you are. You have to reinforce what they think, and you have to redirect the conversation. I started with the redirection there. Look, don't go in. Look, if you are already in a space, and there are some cities that are more closely associated with coronavirus than others, there are some states that are more closely associated with. There are some brands that are. I had a hotelier, tell me a lot of things that they were going to do, and my advice was, look, you run a hotel, not a hospital, okay? It's great and it's smart and it's necessary that you're doing all of those things. But from a brand perspective, I wouldn't lead with that. I would make that available on an asking basis. Yes, we're doing all these things for people who ask, but again, the reason people are coming to you is that they know what your product is. They like your product. They've likely been there. There's a high repeat visitation rate. And you just need to understand that to overreact is one thing, to inform and redirect is another, and it's different for everybody. And I know there are different pressures at work in all of those spaces, but be aware, just be aware that that's something that you have control over. I don't know if you remember this, but John might, because he was traveling in the 70s when I was traveling, just like that recovery, John. That when you go to these hotels, and remember over the toilet seat, there used to be that like Miss America sash. It didn't say Miss America. It said sanitized for your safety, comfort, or convenience, or whatever the hell it was. But it was that thing that was on the toilet that said the toilet had been cleaned. I imagine, I've seen different hotel brands already come out with a list of 10 or more items that they have guaranteed are going to be in every room, a new checklist for all of the support staff to say in every room that you go into, these are ordinary things, and on top of that, other things like that are going to be taken care of. Now, I imagine, I'm surprised that maybe some hotel or some chain in general doesn't have just a simple little sticker, boom, like it's on the door, and it's between the door jamb and the door, and it's sealed. And when you open that door, it unseals itself, just to let you know, something very small, but very visual, that when you go into that room, that these things have been met. And that's our little reminder that, yes, we've met those things. So there are subtle ways to do this. And I would just say it's a conversation that needs to be responded to in a certain way. I don't know that any particular brand, particularly a hotel brand right now, is going to rise above the others as being somehow viewed as more user-friendly in this way than other brands. So Be really careful about any moves that you make on that level. Understand your audience. Most of us know our audiences. We know our visitors. We know what they look like and what they come to expect from our brand, from our destinations. Our destinations are, you know, and this goes into the same thing, but when we remind, reinforce, redirect, I mentioned Virginia. There's some other great examples out there. You're basically just sending postcards right now to your visitors, to your clients, to your brand evangelists, your loyalists. You're reminding them that, look, when you are ready, these are the things, these are the portions, the parts of our destination, of our experience that you've always loved. Our job right now is to remind you of those things. And I'm going to talk about Florida for just a minute, because Florida is a juggernaut for tourism, just not around the state, only the state in the U.S., but the world. Florida is broken into two pieces right now. One is the greater Orlando area theme parks, and everyone knows that theme parks are the the beating heartbeat of tourism that pumps the blood of the tourism economy throughout Central Florida and beyond. And I saw Disney's has plans to reopen in July some of the parks there, and those will slowly reopen. It'll be iterative, and it'll evolve that way. So until such time as that goes, we are operating minus one of our tourism drivers in a very big way. The other two pieces are air travel, international air travel, events and conventions, meetings, conventions, and cruise. So when you look at all those things together, and you look at something like a Miami has 90-something% of its visitation comes in via airplane, and a huge percentage of that, a big percentage of that, is international. They do a lot of events, as you know. They do a lot of conventions. There's a huge cruise in it. My point is, there's a lot of their levers of their brand that are challenged at the moment, and some destinations are more challenged than other. Miami really doesn't have a drive market per se, and if you're a destination, you really can't reinvent your marketing mix overnight. You can't say, well, I'm gonna go more in a drive market if you don't have one. If your drive market is 4% or less, I don't know what kind of penetration you're going to get there. So I would say, look very carefully. There's some things you're able to change on the fly and redirect, and there's some other things that really aren't as malleable as that. So if you're aware of the difference between the two, I would say just keep aware of your brand. Go back to your authentic brand movers. What are the levers of your brand, of your destination, and make sure that what you're doing is in keeping with those. So there's that. The fourth one is learn the lesson, and I think the lesson that I'm talking about is you can't learn it yet because the lesson's not over, right? We're in the middle of this. We are emerging from one phase of it into another phase, but the one thing that I will say, after having gone through the oil spill, was take notes. Take a lot of notes. Even every day, just write something down, because things are moving so quickly. You're going to forget of all the little different dynamics that emerged, and all the different questions that came across your desk and your radar, and how you dealt with them. If not for posterity, for the next crisis we have, and by all intents and by all likelihood, we will likely have a similar crisis of this, if I'm listening to some of the experts on that level. So, and the other thing about a lesson is that word that I like. A lesson is, what is the experience? A lesson is also a warning or a threat. Learn your lesson. Oh, I guess he learned his lesson, like a punishment. And the third one is it's a teaching. You know, what is the teaching here? Be aware of what the lessons are, because lessons have good and bad. They sometimes they hurt. Sometimes this lesson will hurt, but if you learn it and move forward with it, that's something that can come from it, and something positive can come out of something that seems very negative. But the biggest takeaway on the lesson level is it's not over. This lesson isn't yet learned. So keep aware. I know it's difficult to sustain that level of vigilance and alertness, but it's absolutely necessary if you're going to learn that lesson and incorporate what you've learned into your brand and into your operations moving forward. The other, and the last one is, and I ran through these quickly because this is a smart group, and I think you guys know what I'm talking about, and I'm really curious to handle your questions as well. But, and the last one is partner. And I say this all the time, and I know you guys, particularly IGLTA, is an organization that understands partnership. You promote it all the time, you live it. At your conventions, I see how that partnership works. I see how specifically in this space, people understand partnership and they value partnership and they seek partnerships, and they're very successful at it. In fact, I think the group on this IGLTA call right now could teach a lot of other industries and a lot of other organizations about partnership. And I think it's because it's a smart group and people understand how to do it, but I don't know that other organizations are as hungry to partner because they rest a little more on their laurels. But I'll just give you one example here from the DMO space, which is, look, if you're in a DMO across the, well, depending on where you are, but I'll use Florida as an example. The three-legged stool of, you know, your worth as a DMO comes from the bed tax, comes from people staying in hotels, comes from rate, occupancy, and revenue per available room, RevPAR. And right now, those three barometers are kind of in the toilet. How else can you measure the efficacy of your destination, of the success of your tourism product, of your brand? And I think this is a great time for every destination to claim more real estate, to say, look, we aren't just hotels, we aren't just bed tax, we are arts spending, and we are nightlife, and we are restaurants, and we are airport, and we are part of all those other things that have somehow been divorced from the tourism product successfully. And I understand why. There's a lot of organizations that want to claim credit for all of those other pieces. But when it comes down to it, look, if someone isn't coming to your destination, let me rephrase that. If someone is coming to your destination, the first reason they're coming there is because of the destination, right? They aren't coming there largely because of the airport or however great your airport might be. They aren't coming there because of your brand new Holiday Inn Express. It's a nice place, but unless it was in that destination, they likely wouldn't be staying there. Perhaps I could use a little more aspirational example than a Holiday Inn Express, but I think you understand what I mean. You are a much bigger economic impact, and that's what this comes down to. An economic impact, a driver of tourism, a driver of the economy, a driver of jobs, a driver of all those other things. And again, from the Florida perspective and other states, you know, tourism gets smacked around because of how we're funded. We're funded by a bed tax. A bed tax is a highly political thing. A lot of them are very closely associated with counties or with states. What are those associated with? Politicians. What a politician's job? One, get reelected. How do you do that? Well, you stand on the shoulders of other people. Boy, that was bitter, but it's not untrue. The point being, this is a time to find partners, to increase your definition of partnership, to increase your definition of the worthiness of your brand, because this is an opportunity, and this is an opportunity that you really shouldn't let pass you up. So those five right there. Don't give Corona. Josh, if you could put the slate back up for me, that'd be cool. You know, don't give your brain coronavirus. There's no hold music. Remind, reinforce, redirect, learn your lesson, and the lesson being this is not over. And then the last one, partner, and redefine partnership and find new ways to do that. So that is a little bit of a condensed version, because I know there's a lot of smart people on here who would likely want to ask questions. So I'll throw it back to Josh to moderate, I believe.
Great, thank you so much, David. Yeah, I think I definitely got a lot out of that. I think that's fascinating to hear how St. Pete handled the oil spills in 2010 and how you had to take and shift that focus from the actual event that was going on and reshift the focus to, hey, you know, this destination isn't being affected in such a bad way. And I also really want to thank you for your shout out to IGLTA and our partnerships, because we definitely value that, and we really do value all of our members here, you know, and taking that opportunity where we can learn from one another as well. So with that, I really just want to open it up to the floor and you know, provide everybody an opportunity to learn from one another. And if you have any questions or comments for David, feel free to unmute and speak freely.
It always seems hard to get somebody to ask the first question.
And I know this group is not that shy because I know almost all of you, so.
Okay, I'll start. I have a lot to say. Let's see, I don't even know where to begin. So,
Oh, I think I'm in trouble.
I'm trying to think of, you know, I was thinking about why we were sitting here. It's like when we started these calls, how we felt and what we were talking about and where we are now. And it's like it's surreal, to be quite honest. And honestly, I was more hopeful then than I am now, honestly. And we've all worked very hard during this. And for me in Hawaii, it's become not Visit Florida specific. I mean, obviously, I remember sitting with David at a marketing retreat for Visit Florida when we were talking about the oil spill, but it's become a very politicized thing for us here. The way that we're funded, the tourism accommodation tax, etc. We literally have 11 flights a day coming into the state of Hawaii from all over the world. 11. Down from, I think, 180. And so we went from 33,000 visitors a day, and now we have about 230 with a 14-day quarantine. But the interesting thing is that what is kind of disheartening for me is that tourism is now becoming a resident hot button, and the residents don't want the tourists to come back, but at the same time, we have 1/3 of our entire state population is unemployed right now, the highest in the United States. So I think that there's so many variables happening, and it's like, how is best to communicate all those things? And I was on a call yesterday, a public hearing, a marketing committee of Hawaii Tourism Authority, and somebody asked a question about, well, who's going to take ownership of communicating this recovery to everyone? And like everybody says, well, we're all part of the part of the solution, but nobody wants to be the owner of the solution because they're afraid of whatever the ramifications might be at the end of the day. So I think that every destination is different. Every destination depends on tourism in different ways to their overall economic, as you said, economic driver, economic impact. You know, I'm kind of like all over the place, but what I'm saying is that I think that there's just so many layers, and really, because it gets so overwhelming, and I think it's good for people, even in the same organization, to split it up, stay in your lane, work together, and try to figure out the best way to move forward. We legally cannot market to anybody right now during the quarantine, and our vendors don't understand that, but we cannot spend a single nickel on promoting the state of Hawaii right now globally. So, we're preparing and planning for the recovery, and when we can, but until that day happens, we can't do that. So it's really an interesting time. And I lived through 9/11. I watched 9/11 out my office window. I worked in travel. I worked at Travel Week. I worked at North Star, was Connors back then, got laid off. Then I was during the recession. I was also during the BP oil spill for Visit Florida, all these things. And I think we always say we could learn from these lessons. And I think we learn them and then we forget them. And I think we have to figure out a way to be able to keep things top of mind. I think this one is very different, and I think we will remember this. But I think it's just when things start rolling again, we just kind of get in our own lane and forget. So, that's just my 2 cents. It's just my thought about all this, but it's really just kind of like this full circle thing that we've all experienced together. And as David says, the lesson hasn't been learned yet, and we're still learning daily, minute by minute.
Trevor, you bring up a very good point. No, and you're exactly right. Every destination has its own limiters, and you are forbidden. There's two others that I know of like that. But let me go back last November here in Florida. Now stay with me on this. Here in Florida, the Speaker of the House was promoting cutting Visit Florida to $0. This is before coronavirus, right? And that guy got zero blowback from our industry because no one wants to take on the Speaker of the House. And I get it. They get their money, and I went into it, through politics, through the back door. But to me, that is the Achilles heel of this industry, is that when we have people who are so beholden and betrothed to this gravy train of it, and I'm not saying I have an answer, but you touched on it exactly right there, is that until we take off our gloves and start landing punches very aggressively into the public sphere, and you said something very telling there, that it's spilling over into the residents, right, who don't want the visitors to come, even while your unemployment's at 30%, right? So for me, that's an educational opportunity. I know that's easy for me to sit here and say, but those two things are directly proportional. How many residents do we have, and how many visitors do we have, and how many residents employed do we have? That's those two things run on the same graph. So there is, I think, and I know how it's politicized there. I know how it's politicized everywhere, because look at the amount of money that's coming in from this industry. A lot of other people want to claim this, but at the end of the day, it's the people who are bringing in the visitors and the visitation product there. So there is not an easy answer, and you have a very unique example there. You have a lot of other things standing in your way at the moment. But I think the overall takeaway, from the point I'm trying to make is, as an industry, at least domestically, we really have to get much more aggressive about telling our story. And I think this is an example of a moment where if we had more aggressive levers to pull, we could recover more quickly.
Agreed.
What else?
Okay, up the pregnant pause here. David, good to see you. Nice always to see fellow Floridian online. But, it's interesting how we're all looking at this great presentation. I think each of us has to look at our destination and the items you bring up and reflect on how that works in our individual situations. And Jeffrey, you and I both are looking at 30% unemployment. We're on the flip side that fortunately in our destination and our state legislature, they know that tourism has to get back, because that's the machine that drives a huge chunk of our state's economy here. But I think it's interesting in that, I'm starting to see us as a destination air television ads on a national level. I just wanted to see, not only from you, David, but everyone else, have you guys seen, again, we've had conversations over the past several weeks that it's going to be a drive market that starts to return. And when are people going to return is dependent on what their comfort level is. And I just wanted to kind of see from everyone else what advertising you're seeing or what messaging you're seeing, because we have basically started launching it. We're not ready for you, but when we're ready, when you're ready, and when we're open, we're ready and waiting for you. So I just wanted to kind of see what other people have seen, because again, markets are so regionalized with the advertising buys.
Well, I'll answer, then throw it to someone else. I spoke with two providers of national advertising, of network advertising, paid advertising the other day. And to answer your question, from their perspective, not a lot right now. And they see a little bit coming online, but there are only X number of brands who advertise national anyway. Their thinking is it's going to come back first on the hotel level, and on the airline level, and on the very big brand level before it reaches destination brand level. So that was a little bit of intelligence yesterday from a seller of that type of thing. But I'll throw it to someone else at a destination.
David,
That one.
and regarding the online travel agents, the authors, is this a good platform for, for the recovery to use online, Expedia, Booking, etc.? Did you understand?
Your audio is a little garbled. Could you say again?
I'm sorry. It's regarding the online travel agencies. If it's a good platform for destinations. I'm sorry. It's better now?
Yeah.
Yeah, just to have an idea, how is the platform from the online travel agents, like Booking and the Collar, Expedia, if it's a good platform for, destination to work with?
I have a comment on that. And I honestly say this is a watershed moment for destinations working with OTAs. And some have had extremely, because of the challenge when all these air cancellations and hotel cancellations, and if they have a short-term rental platform, all those people that had a nightmare or still have yet or will never get a refund or a credit, because people don't realize that when you book through those platforms, you're not a customer of the end product. You're a customer of that platform. And it makes it very challenging with that particular chain. So in my opinion, personal opinion, this is not my organizational opinion, we won't probably ever work with one again. We will go direct and work with our partners that way. It was it's been a nightmare. And but I know that certain geographies such as Brazil or other European countries, really, that is the first thought where people go to book. So it is, I think, your opportunity for the destination, because, and I hate that I know all this information, is that we had to send letters to the presidents and the senior teams of all the OTAs and the airlines to say that we have a quarantine, and to please stop marketing and to put a warning on your website and all these other things. And some were very cooperative in working with us, and others say it's not our job to do, etc. And I think that it just goes to show the value of working direct, because you have more leverage, you have more influence, you have all these things. This is from a DMO or from a partner to partner perspective. And I'm not saying that there's no place for an OTA. It's just that it shouldn't be the first place. It should be as part of the mix, not the primary part of the mix. Because I know that they're important, booking component to all of our destinations and companies. But I think it's just you as the partner, anybody, whoever it is on the call, you definitely have leverage to re-evaluate your relationship with them and to work more in partnership and tandem maybe than you have before.
Jeffrey, let me jump in on that too. And I'll go one step further, and that sounds like a pretty draconian thing to say, to not work with the OTAs. That's a huge deal. And I'll just give you an example from my personal travels. ITB, everyone who was going to ITB, as you know, was canceled very late in the game, like 4 days before we're supposed to start or something like that. I was staying at a partner hotel of ITB who refused to refund my money. So, and I booked directly with them. For those of you keeping score, it's the Sheraton Berlin Grand Hotel Esplanade. Please send them an email on my behalf. I'm joking. But I think that whole freeze up there had so many moving parts to it and so many intransigent and really, to your point, unfortunate and short-sighted decisions being made about how to deal with their clients. That will be, I think you've touched on something, that will be a taste that will be hard to get out of a lot of people's mouths. And the airline have some of this on them too. We're offering, we're going to extend your credit until 2024 or whatever it is now. So in a time when a lot of people just would rather have their cash back, but I think you've touched on something there. What else?
Very shy group today. Well, I'll ask a question. Just this is kind of generically, and you mentioned about hotel brands communicating what they're doing in the space of cleaning rooms and public spaces and things. Did you see that? I don't know if it was Marriott or Hyatt, or excuse me, Marriott or Hilton, that said they're going to partner with Lysol in kind of a marketing campaign of working together to ensure you know, the rooms and the public spaces are sanitized. Do you see that as a trend that businesses are going to need to? It was Hilton, thanks, Adrian. Are going to need to do things like this. And I don't know if that plays into destinations as well, because there's so many components of a destination.
John, I'll answer that, and I'll throw it out again. You know, this weekend, I'm sure everyone saw it over Memorial Day weekend. All the news cameras on, you know, the beaches in Alabama and the beaches in the Florida Panhandle, and the, you know, the not a social distancing or mask anywhere, and that was that. And I was talking with a friend of mine out in LA after that, and he said, "Yeah, I just want to tell you, it's not that different here." You fly into this space where you can provide these things and you can, you know, lead horses to water, but at the end of the day, it's going to be about people making decisions to do things or not do things. And I think going back to my original premise is, until that conversation has been initiated with you, again, my own personal thinking, and until that conversation has been initiated with you from a brand perspective, at this point, I wouldn't lead with it, because it redirects from the fact that a lot of people know already. Everybody knows what 6 feet is. Everybody knows what a face mask is like. Everyone knows what the expectations are. And it does, I think some of the other people said earlier, it becomes a highly politicized thing. And the last thing any brand really wants to do, good or bad, evil, right or wrong, is to weigh into what is essentially become a very politicized environment. And I'll just leave it there, but that's just something to consider as you move forward.
Thanks. Josh, I think we had an online question.
Oh, and Richard. All right, so Richard Armstrong is asking, with regard to future travel vouchers, I'm seeing some suppliers, including LGBT suppliers, who are offering discounted vouchers. For example, pay $100 and get $110 value when you redeem the voucher. This feels like desperation, which it likely is. Whether a supplier or destination, would you recommend this approach?
You know, I'll answer from a marketing or brand perspective again. The verge of talking too much, but you know, I think anything you can do right now to draw attention to your brand in some authentic way, and people have always given some sort of vouchers for that. I've seen some brands do a sweepstakes right now. You know, when you're good and ready, you're going to win the trip of a lifetime here. Whenever you're good and ready, it has no expiration on it. Basically, it's a 25. You can use it whenever you want. It's not good for a year. So I think there's ways to reinvent what you do, and until you've addressed those levers I talked about earlier in terms of brand demand and where your visitors are coming from historically, and what you can do to scoop more of them, get their attention that way. I think not specifically that initiative, but any initiative you do, as long as you think it's in the authentic space of your brand, and something you can do to grab a little attention and grab a little brand love for it, I say try it out, because it can't necessarily hurt. I wonder what my friend from Las Vegas thinks of that.
Well, I was going to follow up because, so going from a conservative side to a very aggressive side, those of you who may not have seen what happened yesterday, we're actually, well, our governor has now moved us to phase 2 starting this Friday. So that means gyms, pools, water parks, spa services are all going to be able to start reopening with limitations. And June 4th, casinos reopen. And one of our independent casinos, the D downtown, and Derek Stevens is he's kind of an old school Vegas practitioner. He wanted to get kick-started, so he's not doing it necessarily in partnership with us as the destination. There was coordination, but he actually is buying 1,000 one-way tickets from about 30 different cities, and people could book and come to Vegas next week. They're going to reopen. Many of the casinos are going to reopen at midnight, so it's kind of a tradition in Vegas that you open up a casino at 12:01 a.m. And it sold out in 1 hour. And he actually went, and I think he's bought something like another 700 or 800 seats for the following weekend. So it's very, very aggressive, but it's somebody who's, rather than discounting, they're trying to get people back to a state of, let's take a chance, let's go on vacation. And if you're comfortable with it, here's a great offer. The hook is it's a one-way ticket. You got to fly your way home, but the longer you stay, the more money we make. So that was something that launched yesterday, and it gives you an example. 1,000 seats were sold out in 1 hour.
That's pretty funny. That's a one-way ticket.
Yeah,
we all know.
Get them here.
Right. Yeah.
And I think the interesting that, when you see how he relates to the destination, he owns 2 hotels downtown. He has a 3rd one under construction, but that ticket is not staying at his hotel. He says, we just need you back in Las Vegas. If you stay at our hotel's great, decide that you want to stay somewhere else, that's fine. We need you here. This destination needs you. If you go on the D.com, their website, there's kind of an intro video of him, and it's pretty interesting to see that he's putting his mouth or his money out where this opportunity is open for anyone, and you don't have to stay at his property.
And Jim, as you know, that's taken a playbook from a lot of nations that are dependent on tourism. I mean, there are some island nations, I won't name them, that basically subsidize their airlines to such a degree to make sure that the flight to these islands are very inexpensive, because they know once they get people to the island, you'll spend money, you'll stay there, and you'll return because it's a cheap flight. So that's taken a page out of classic, tourism development playbook. I'll be really curious to see how it turns out.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
next 2 weekends. So
can I stay with you?
Well, I guess on that note, I just wanted to give another chance to anyone else if you have any questions as we get closer to the hour. And if not, thank you so much, David. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to present with us here at IGLTA.
It was my honor. Thanks for having me, and I'll see everyone at the bar afterwards.